that the PowerPoint is available there in the chat, and it's also in your calendar invite if you want to pull that up and follow along as we go. So we just kind of wanted to give an opportunity to talk through improvement planning. Some of you may not have been able to make it to the summit and some of the sessions that we had there, and then we know that maybe some of your questions didn't get answered as well. So we wanted to just give another opportunity for you to hear some of our information. So to kind of start off, we just want to kind of talk through the continuous improvement model that we have. We know that so much has changed over the last couple of years, but we want to assure you that we still believe that our model is really an effective process, and that our model really doesn't solely rely on one type of data or one data source. So even though our state assessment data has been affected, we know, by COVID and the things that have gone on in the last couple of years, your school and your district should have other data that you can rely on, local data that's been collected over the past 2 years that can inform and guide your plans as well. And so we invite you to gather your data and to collaborate with your stakeholders as you develop your plan for moving forward. And as we talk through our model, it's really the responsibility of us here at KDE to kind of monitor the compliance for federal and state requirements, but school improvement is so much more than compliance, and we realize that. And so it's really the school and the district's responsibility then to kind of monitor progress and the effectiveness of your plan and your activities moving forward. So we believe that our process is really designed for both compliance and continuous improvement. And so really the hard work goes on before the actual completion of the diagnostics. The processes that you have in place for reviewing data, for making decisions, for implementing the actions, that's really at the heart of the improvement process. And so the diagnostics then are just kind of a reflection of those processes that really capture the work, mainly for communication and for compliance purposes. As we look to the regulation that kind of outlines our improvement process, we see that it's established in 703 KAR 5:225, and that's where the components of the plan are outlined. And so the things I wanted to point out specifically out of there is, remember that a CDIP is defined as a plan developed by the district with input from parents, faculty, staff, and representatives of school councils. And then a CSIP is defined as a plan developed by the school council with input from parents, faculty, and staff. The other thing that I really want to point out in terms of the regulation itself is that even though there are deadlines set in there, that doesn't mean that revisions to your plan cannot occur throughout the year. So yes, there are specific timelines and there are deadlines for each of the diagnostics, but as you get additional data, as additional needs become clear to you, please know that it's very appropriate to go in and revise things that you have in there. The more you know, the more that you can do, as we say. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Marcia, and she's going to share just a little bit of information about our platform with you.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you again for joining us. My portion will be brief. I just want to point you to eProve is now being called Continuous Improvement Platform. So it's just a renaming. Everything else remains the same. You will find the same features, the same function, everything else works the same. You do access this from Cognia, and you can see the web address there on this sheet on our presentation. One thing I do want to give you just a little user-friendly tip. When you're going in to make your diagnostic, please triple check that if you're a district and you're completing the district piece, that's where you are. If you are a school, just make sure that you are on your school site. By making sure you're on the right platform and you're filling in the correct piece, it will save you some headache down the road if there's an error. So just a little user tip there for you. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Natalie.
Good morning. So if you take a look, this is our timeline for the comprehensive district and school improvement planning. We have already, closed out phase one for the comprehensive district plan improvement plan. And for the comprehensive school improvement plan. And so the rest you'll see phase two is what's going on right now with the needs assessment, the district assurances, the district safety reports. Then you'll be moving into phase three in November, which has the professional development plan, and you see all of that there. Lastly is phase four, which happens between January 1st and the new year and through the following year. This is where you're implementing your plan. What is new at the district level this year is this English learner plan for districts, the LAO plan. That is due May 1st. And then you have the continuation of learning plan for districts is also due May 1st. If you take a look at the comprehensive school improvement plan, there isn't anything new here. The phases are pretty much the same, except for this happens at the school level. The only thing that has changed is in phase three, we have removed the closing the achievement gap diagnostic. It is not its own separate diagnostic, and instead it is merged in the CSIP. So before you were having to complete it twice, and this way with us removing it, you don't, we're not creating any redundancy. So although these phases do have certain dates, you can work on these at any time throughout the year, work on them as necessary. And then here we have our diagnostic contacts. So for school safety report and district safety report, the contact is Doug Roberts. For the professional development plan for schools and professional development plan for districts, you would contact Renee Yates. For the continuation of learning plan for districts, you would contact Stephen Kissinger. For the English learner plan for districts, the LAO plan, you would contact Jessica Sanderson. And for all remaining diagnostics, you would contact Ruth, Marcia, or myself.
Great, thank you. I will just kind of reiterate this English learner plan for districts, the LAO plan. The plan itself is not new. That's been a requirement for districts for a number of years, but this is the first year that we're kind of collecting some assurances. And if you look at the diagnostic, you'll see that it really kind of helps you make sure that you have included all the necessary pieces to that plan. And I will just mention that along with the diagnostic itself, it does ask you to upload your actual LAO plan into the platform. So let's take a look at what we call our templates. Along with the diagnostics, there are a couple of templates that are kind of designed to walk you through either the needs assessment process or creating your school and district improvement plan. So you'll notice if you've been around that the needs assessment key elements is a new template for us this year. And then the goal building template is similar to what it's been in years past. It's just where that one is used to kind of lay out your strategies and activities that you have determined we're going to implement to really get you to the goals that you have set for yourselves. So let's take a look and talk through a little bit about this needs assessment key elements piece. So the key elements template is really designed to kind of guide your team through a review of the processes, practices, and conditions that really support teaching and learning. And we know that schools and districts are not necessarily required to specifically use the key core work processes as their improvement approach. Really, any established school improvement model or approach should include each of these elements. So it's not necessarily that you have to use them as your approach, but each of these categories should be involved in whichever approach you choose to use. So as your team reviews each element, you want to consider what processes, what protocols, what kind of documents and data do you have that would be evidence about the degree to which your school or your district meets each of these expectations. For example, when you think about the design and deploy standards, you might list things like a curriculum review protocol maybe that you use. Perhaps you have documentation of revisions that you've made to curriculum maps, or maybe you have schedule of, let's say, professional development that you've done that supports the implementation of standards. So as a team, you're thinking through, what do we have that shows where we're at regarding design and deploy standards? And then even beyond listing those things, after you've gathered this data, you really kind of want to ask the questions, what's working well with the way we design and deploy standards? Are these items monitored and evaluated for effectiveness? And do we know that this practice is really impacting all students in every classroom? So it's much more about the reflection and the discussion that goes on, and not simply just a list. So when you include all that information in your template, you are going to upload that template onto the platform as part of your needs assessment diagnostic. And because that is such a new area, I will kind of stop here and see if there's any questions about this particular template before we move on. And if not, we'll have some time at the end, and then as always, you can contact us later as questions arise. So with the goal setting template, this should be a familiar one to you if you've been around for a while. They have been refreshed just a little bit, but there really are no major changes. Keep in mind that the CDIPs and the CSIPs really are developed as 3 to 5 year plans, and that the goals that you put are within that time frame, that 3 to 5 year time frame. And then you're including objectives for this current year. What is it that we hope to accomplish in the 21-22 school year? That's your objectives. So when you start the process each year, you should review the goals, objectives, strategies, and activities that you have in there from previous years. And what you want to do is to consider whether you just need to stay the course, whether you want to make some revisions to some of your strategies or activities, or whether you need to replace some things. So it's always important to start off with a review of what you've been doing. And we know that state assessment data has made goal setting difficult for the couple last years, but we will talk through some options and some suggestions here in a few slides. So knowing that the new accountability system is not fully in place yet, and the data that you were provided from last spring state assessments really don't address those new indicators in that system. So our template does continue with the current indicators for this year's plan, knowing that one big difference moving forward with the new accountability system is this idea of a separate indicator for addressing the progress of English learners. It would be totally reasonable and appropriate if you chose to maybe add an EL goal as one of your optional ones within your template. So don't get too caught up in the name of the indicator of the goal area. What we really want you to focus on is the intent and the focus of that element, and just choose goals and activities that are meaningful for you, your school, your district moving forward. So here's just a screenshot and a list of the elements that are in the CSIP planning template. So keep in mind, and as I said, here's the indicators are on the current system that we're still a part of. Keep in mind that if you have schools that are identified for CSI or ATSI, that there are additional sections on the template that address their specific requirements. Another thing to remember is that if you are a school that's operating a school-wide, a Title I school-wide program, the CSIP serves as your school-wide plan. So there is no separate school-wide program plan that's needed, that's required, But what you want to be sure is that you've included strategies and activities and funding sources that indicate the Title I services that you are providing in there. We mentioned earlier that the information for the achievement gap requirement is going to be contained in the goal building template this year. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that template up just to give you a picture of it if you have not downloaded that as of yet. So here's what that particular part of the template now looks like. So you'll notice that there's no longer a long-term goal up here at the top. We've given you reference to the statute where the achievement gap comes in. And what you're going to include here in the objectives are those yearly targets that your school council is going to determine for each of your subgroups. So no long-term goal anymore, but here's where your yearly targets come in, is in these objectives, and you're choosing your strategies and activities that are going to get you to those goals. Let me pull our PowerPoint back up. So I mentioned earlier that there are some options for goal setting, given the disruption that we've had to state assessments and to school in general over the last couple of years. So on this slide, you see kind of a screenshot of a guidance document that is available on the Comprehensive Improvement Planning website, and it's also linked at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. That guidance kind of walks through some options for this year. And if you followed the guidance last year, you'll see that it's very similar. The one thing that we did this year was to kind of rank them in order that we believed might be most beneficial for schools and districts. But the bottom line is it's really up to the district and the school to decide what data is going to be most meaningful to you. So even though, you know, we have this as we have create goals aligned to formative and summative assessment data as our number one. If you feel that your state assessment data is more valid and reliable for your district and your school, then that's your number one. So it really is a school or a district decision. So let's talk through a little bit of each of these options that we've laid out. So your first option you have is if your district and or school has a pretty robust assessment system and you have some formative and summative assessment data available to you, maybe it's MAP scores, maybe it's iReady, but if you feel like that's going to be the most reliable data for your students, then you can go ahead and create goals and objectives this year around those data points. As we talked about earlier, you just want to review the strategies and activities that you have been doing in each of those areas, determine if you need to make some revisions in those or if you're just moving forward with those same activities. So option one is you could use some formative and assessment local data that you have to set your goals. The second option is to kind of take a look at your previous goals and use those, continue with those, but you want to make sure that you update your objectives for this year. So if you look at your CSIP from last year and you determine, yes, we're still on track, this still is a good goal for, let's say, reading and math, we're going to stick with that goal. But then you want to make sure that you revisit what's our objective for this year. If this is our goal for the next 3 to 5 years, what's our objective for this year to get us to that ultimate goal? So be sure, even though you may be using last year's goal, you're still opening up a new diagnostic, you're still putting that goal in there, and you're making sure that your objectives relate to this year, this school year. Number 3 on our list is K-Prep data. If you feel like your school and district had great participation and you feel like your K-Prep data is a good indicator of your students' achievement at this point, you can feel free to use K-Prep data as you have in years past. Again, that's local decision there. And then the last option that we have is something that's called a statistical projection. And if you go on the Comprehensive Improvement Planning website, you will see a link to a webinar that kind of walks you through the steps of this statistical projection. And kind of in a nutshell, what it is you're going to use your past data, and it will show you the steps to kind of plug it into a spreadsheet that will then kind of predict what you could have expected in the 2021 school year, and then what you could expect for the 21-22 school year. So it kind of gives you this range of, because this has been your data for the previous years, here's where you would likely have fallen out this year and next year. You know, knowing that things got in the way the last couple of years, you're not locked into, okay, it says this is where we should be, this has to be our goal, but it just kind of gives you that window to think about. If we had been going along as usual, where might we be this year and next year? So again, that you can find the webinar to kind of walk you through that particular process. Really, no matter which of the options you choose, the thing we want to stress is you want to choose the data that's going to be most meaningful to your teachers and to your processes. And always remember to download a new template, open a new diagnostic, and then consider what changes have gone on in our needs and our priorities, given what has occurred over the last 2 years. So as we said, we know that we are in this transition period with our accountability system. So thinking ahead, you can assume that there will be changes to the current diagnostics after our consolidated state plan is approved and after the new accountability system gets fully into place. And so it is our intent and it will be our work to make sure that those diagnostics and templates created for future years really do complement the new requirements and the improvement planning process moving forward. We've provided a few resources for you as you work through your process. You'll see that the first one is that continuous improvement planning guide that I referenced earlier that kind of walks you through the options for goal setting. There's also a guidance piece on our website for the superintendent gap assurance. I will just mention that similar to last year, the 17-18 and the 18-19 data is what's going to be used to determine which schools have met their gap targets. And so the answers on that superintendent gap assurance will be the same as what they included last year. But remember, you do need to open a new diagnostic and make sure that information is included in this year's diagnostic. We've given you a link to the user manual for the continuous improvement platform, which is formerly eProve. And so if you are new to the system and just want a little bit more direction in either managing users or maybe opening and creating diagnostics, then that's available there for you. We've linked just the improvement planning website itself. There's lots of other resources on there. I will mention, you know, we have continuous improvement coaches who work across the state. They work extensively with improvement planning, with the needs assessment. They've done a lot of work with the key core work processes. And so that key elements template, if you're struggling with that, that would be a great resource for you to tap into for some additional guidance on that. And then the last piece that we have included on there is just a link to a Cognia resource where they kind of describe the philosophy and some of the systems of a successful school district for dealing with school improvement. So before we close up, I just want to give an opportunity again for any questions that you may have about what you've heard today or things that we didn't get to discuss today.
And Ruth, if I may, I'll add that we're a small group, so you're more than welcome to unmute yourself. You can use that chat box. This is an opportunity to ask any and all kinds of questions related to improvement planning that you may have while you have the experts here in front of you.
All right, well, if there are no questions here, oh, I see one. Did you say the superintendent gap assurance will be the same as last year? That is correct. They're using the same data, and so their answers to which schools did or did not, meet their targets will be the same as what they answered last year. But they will just open a new diagnostic and make sure that that information is input into a new diagnostic for this year. Trying to use my teacher wait time here. So if there are no other questions, I'll leave you here with our contact information. Please do not hesitate to reach out by email, by phone, if you have questions as you go through the process. Your questions always help us in terms of our processes and how we share information and train in the future. So please don't ever hesitate to contact us if you do have questions or just want some clarification on any of the parts of the process. I will go ahead and hang on here for a few more minutes to make sure everybody gets their questions answered. But at this point, I just want to say thank you again for joining us today and have a great day.